Hello, this is the third of three videos that I have produced to help you with your work on the assignment. It's about phrase structure rules. As we already know, phrase structure rules can be used to provide a formal description of a specific phrase. It's also important to remember that phrase structure rules only specify the immediate constituents of this phrase. They can contain no reference to material which is more deeply embedded within these individual constituents. Take as an example the noun phrase a very small school in Strong. The corresponding phrase structure rule for this specific phrase would be NP consists of a determiner, an adjective phrase, a noun, and a preposition phrase. Specific phrase structure rules, like the one that we have here, do not contain optional elements for obvious reasons. A specific phrase structure rule is used to describe an actual language example. There is nothing optional about any of the words in this noun phrase, which is why we don't use brackets to show optionality in specific phrase structure rules. We can, of course, use a phrase structure rule as a general statement of what a phrase or a phrase type can involve. As you are already aware, in part D of the assignment, you're first asked to provide phrase structure rules for three specific noun phrases, and as a next step, you're also asked to provide a general phrase structure rule which covers the composition of all three noun phrases. Let's try and do something similar here. Let's consider three specific noun phrases: Billy, big luxurious cars, and a lovely morning. And let's try and provide a specific phrase structure rule for each of them. Starting with the first one, Billy, it only contains the head of the phrase, which is the proper noun or the name Billy. Therefore, the corresponding phrase structure rule would be NP consists of N, which is the head of the phrase. Big luxurious cars, in addition to cars, which is the head of the phrase, we also have two adjectives, which are in fact, technically speaking, adjective phrases. Therefore, the corresponding noun phrase would be NP consists of an adjective phrase, a second adjective phrase, and a noun, which is the head of the phrase. In the third noun phrase, a lovely morning, in addition to the head of the phrase, morning, we also have a determiner, which is the article a, and we have an adjective phrase, which is lovely, and these three elements are reflected in the composition of the specific phrase structure rule for this noun phrase, which is NP consists of a determiner, an adjective phrase, and a noun. As a next step, we'll try to integrate these three specific phrase structure rules into one general phrase structure rule. It is important to remember that the general phrase structure rule should reflect the composition of all of the three noun phrases in our sample, and it should only reflect the composition of these three NPs, not any other NPs outside of this sample. Okay, so when we're composing our general phrase structure rule for this sample, these are the the language data that we have to consider and take into account. The first one is that we find a head noun involved in all three noun phrases in our sample. This is hardly surprising because we already know that all phrases must at a minimum contain a head, which is a noun with noun phrases. Therefore, as far as our sample is concerned, the head noun is a mandatory component. Then we find that one of the noun phrases in our sample includes two adjective phrases. The fact that we find two adjective phrases only in one of the three noun phrases means that these are optional components. Same logic applies to the one adjective phrase that we find in the third example, in the third noun phrase. Again, the fact that we only find it in one, not in all three, means that it's an optional component. And finally, again, in only one of the noun phrases in our sample, we find the determiner, suggesting that the determiner is also an optional component. Now, on that basis, we can propose a general phrase structure rule for the whole sample, which would be as follows. NP consists of an optional determiner, an optional adjective phrase, a second optional adjective phrase, and an obligatory head, which is a noun. One question that we could ask ourselves is whether we shouldn't use the clean star with the two optional adjective phrases rather than using brackets. So should we modify our general phrase structure rules in this way to include the clean star rather than brackets to show optionality? The answer to this question is no. We shouldn't, because our sample does not allow for an infinite number of optional APs, only two, so we shouldn't be using the clean star. From previous experience, we also know that noun phrases can contain an optional preposition phrase complement. In view of this, should we change our phrase structure rule to include reference to a possible optional preposition phrase complement, either by using PP in brackets at the end, or perhaps by even using the clean star showing multiple possible optional preposition phrases? The answer again is no. We shouldn't do this because we find no preposition phrases in any of the noun phrases in our sample, and because our general phrase structure rule is meant only to reflect the composition of these three noun phrases, it should not include reference to possible optional preposition phrases. It shouldn't contain any reference to things that are outside of the sample. In summary, the relevant general phrase structure rule should only describe the composition of the noun phrases in our little sample, nothing else. Also, the relevant general phrase structure rule should be composed in a way that it would allow it to describe the composition of all the NPs in our sample, but not necessarily composition of any NPs outside of the sample. In view of all this, the correct phrase structure rule, the correct general phrase structure rule for this sample will be the same as we proposed earlier. NP consists of an optional determiner, an optional adjective phrase, a second optional adjective phrase, and a noun. And this concludes this video presentation on phrase structure rules. Thank you.